All right, so we are here to discuss our lodging tax information session. My name is Andrew Applewick. I'm the events coordinator here for the city of Mountlake Terrace. I'm accompanied by,
I'm Jeff Betts, the Recreation and Parks Director for the city.
And I'm Sarah Solomon, I'm the finance director for the city.
so we're kind of the three people that get really engaged with this process and help understand the information that comes forward. Our purpose tonight is to provide information and for the guidelines of what application process looks like for lodging tax grant allocations and applications, and figure out what people don't know about it and may have questions about the process or the grant itself. For our agenda, we're going to cover the background of the fund, kind of what it's looked like over the years, how it's been allocated, what is lodging tax, what is the criteria to apply for funding, what is the application process itself, what does the selection process look like, when do the allocations get made and payments be made, as well as the timeline for that. So a little recent background for this event is that in 2025, the city had $50,000 budgeted to allocate for lodging tax grant applications for any application that applied and qualified for use of those funds. Previously, the city had $25,000 in grant funding per year, and we increased this to encourage new applicants to apply. If they didn't think they could make it because it was being used elsewhere, we want to encourage that aspect of it. And this amount may change in coming years. It just comes to the budget and how we can utilize that. What is lodging tax? Lodging tax fund comes from the taxes collected from our Studio 6 motel here in Mountlake Terrace, but it is around every city that has a lodging facility. They collect lodging tax from that and they can use it for their funds as well. And so Studio 6 is our only hotel or motel within our city limits. So that is who we currently are collecting our funds through. And this will change in the end of 2026 to reflect the closure of Studio 6. And then the fund will still be available to be allocated as long as we meet criteria for the LTAC, the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, to be represented by short-term rentals or another development that comes in down the road. Now we're going to get into really the fun stuff, and definitely if you need me to slow down or repeat something, just let me know. The criteria for funding. So lodging tax funds can be used towards the marketing and operations of special events and festivals designated to attract tourists. This is from, when we say tourist, it is to attract tourists from other countries or 50 miles away, or that would increase overnight stays. So if your event is not going to attract from 50 miles away, but is an evening event that is really going to encourage people to stay locally, that is something that would qualify. You don't have to check every box for it to be applicable. Lodging tax funds may also be used to support operations and capital expenditures of tourism-related facilities owned or operated by municipality or public facilities district. So some cities use it to maintain their restrooms at regional parks. Other ones do it for different projects to rebuild parts of their city that attract more residents to come and visit them from outside of their jurisdiction. Lodging tax funds may also be used to support the operations of a tourism-related facility owned and operated by a nonprofit organization. This may be a historical site or building such as like Linwood has their historical site and museum, and Edmonds as well. The application process. So state law requires the applicants provide estimates for potential economic impact. A full and completed application packet must be submitted during the application window to be considered for allocation. And the application window for Mountlake Terrace is typically early September through mid-October. So before we dive too much more into this, everybody hopefully has a packet. If you don't, there are extra packets up here on the table. And we're going to kind of go over what the packet says as far as application and what you're going to need to know when applying. And if you have any questions as we're going through this, please stop us, ask questions. We will have a question time at the end, but because this has a lot of information for the actual lodging tax allocations, I want to make sure that those are addressed in the moment. So the top page, front and back, are kind of your guidelines and checklists for what you're going to need to understand as far as legal terms and what you're going to have to submit at the time of application, as well as following up your event. And so you'll have to have your application, your budget report, and you'll have to have a final report after your event, which will compare your expected attendance, expected revenues and everything with everything that you actually finalized with to show clear use of the funds. And there's this really fun yellow highlighted sheet. This is a really important one. And this is where a lot of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee focuses when applying or reviewing applications. So all of these areas were redefined this last year to make it a little clearer and easier as far as terminology goes, to be able to understand what this may require or the ask may be from an organization. So if you have not done an event previously, or this is a first time event, the previous year column is not going to be applicable to you. You would start in your current projections. The previous year column is to reflect if you had an event last year, wasn't a hit, first time event, anything like that, to really show what your numbers finalized look like. Now those should mirror what your final budget was at the end of your application the year prior. If it doesn't, we can have a conversation, figure it out. You're at the bottom where it says other sources of revenue before you get to the expenses. We want to see that the organizations are really trying to pull in sponsorships and revenue outside of just Mountlake Terrace lodging tax, because there are other ways to be able to support your event. And if you're solely relying on lodging tax to be the one financial component, that is not a guarantee. And we want to make sure these events can happen with or without the funding, but not to be the sole sustainability for that event. Snohomish County also has a lodging tax application process that opens multiple times a year that can be applied for. You can get both Mountlake Terrace lodging tax as well as Snohomish County lodging tax for the same event. You are not stuck to only asking or requesting for one. For your projected expenses, this goes to any personnel, salary, and benefits that you want to claim towards the event. Marketing materials, equipment rentals, general expenses. We want this to be as honest and accurate as possible for anything that you may see the expenditures happening for your event. And that could be that you may want to shoot it high and say, we have $50,000 in expected rental equipment. It's better to say that than undershoot yourself and say, well, we're going to hit a deficit, or we're going to be making a ton of money because your estimates are off. Like, try to make it as realistic as possible for that. The next two pages are going to be your actual application itself. And your application is broken down into 15 questions. And after your statement of your organization, you check any category services that you would like to be able to request use of these funds for. So that goes for tourism, promotion, marketing activities, operations of a special event festival designated to attract tourists, operation of a tourism promotional agency, operation of a tourism related facility owned or operated or nonprofit organization, operation and or capital cost of a tourism related facility owned by the municipality. So any box that you check would make it so that's what you're saying that you qualify for, and that's how you would like to use the funds. It's not saying that, you know, you're gonna use it for every part of that. It's not saying if you say marketing, it can only be used for marketing. It's the operational aspect of your event to be able to bring people in. And a couple of numbers that I definitely want to highlight on this would be number 8, 9, 11, 13, and 14. We'll revisit that. On the back page, number 8, did you apply for lodging tax funds from Snohomish County this year? If not, why? We want to encourage people to apply for that so they have more funding for their events to happen here in Mountlake Terrace. So being able to explain why you didn't, if you missed the window, you didn't realize it happened, that's totally fine to share with us very directly on why that was the case. But we want to know. And if you didn't know, we're hoping that now you know for the next year. And then number 9, describe the tourism promotion impact on the economy of your special event. We want to know what you expect your impact to be. what you envision your event bringing to Mountlake Terrace, or how it's going to impact us, the businesses, the roads. You know, is it going to encourage people to stay, you know, locally? Is it going to push more people out of town because there's not enough places to stay? Really, what it is going to look like for your event and how it's going to benefit the city as a whole. We also, number 11, we urge the applicants to have self-sustaining events, festivals, and facilities. Again, we don't want to be the only source of revenue for this event. You're not going to get your money up front for this grant. You get it after the fact. So if you cannot sustain and front the money, then your event's not going to happen because you're getting it after the fact. And number 13, to identify your top 5 sources of revenue. This was a new section added in the past year to identify where each operation or operating facility and or event sees their highest revenue. Is it from your vendors? Is it from admission sales? Is it from selling of goods? How do you plan to bring in your revenue to make this event sustainable? And then number 14, that's the most important part of lodging tax allocation, is to really show us the proposal of how many people you think are going to be at your event. How many overnight stays are you going to anticipate having? How many people are going to be traveling from outside of our jurisdiction to come and be a part of this? It really plays into a huge factor when we're looking at with the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee and the representatives who either work for the hotel, motel, or short-term rentals, to say, is there a potential real impact to bring in revenues, which will then increase taxes that we can then use for future years. So that's a huge part that we really look at to make sure that it is going to potentially have a larger impact in overnight stays and people waking up, going to the coffee shop, getting groceries, doing anything else like that. Anybody have questions at this point from everything I just said? Yes, sir.
Is the application window the same, the county as well as
The question is the application window the same for the county as Mountlake Terrace? It is not. The county has multiple application windows throughout the year. And one of theirs, I think, is closing here in early September, I believe. And so ours is set for where it is right now, just because it aligns with the grant applications coming in and being able to be approved and enter contract at the beginning of the year. So it kind of enters 2026. A lot of other cities that have more revenue coming in from lodging tax can do multiple options for that and have one beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, or however they feel fit. Yes.
Is Studio 6 changing ownership or is it being repurposed?
Question is Studio 6 changing ownership or being repurposed? It is property is going to be repurposed. Make sure correct terminology for that. Both, yes.
So it's sold, the property sold, and I believe it's been reported that they were doing some kind of housing there in general. So I think there's some articles based on that. I think that's out there right now. I don't know all the specifics for it, but it's definitely gonna change hands and change uses.
So how does the city collect lodging tax with no lodger?
Yeah, so how does the city collect lodging tax without a large lodging component? We can request taxes from any short-term rentals that are within the city and utilize those funds as well as the surplus that we do have in the fund currently to maintain allocation of the lodging tax grant fund that we do have, which is why the amounts may change because we want to make sure we can sustain this long term. And so if we're only getting 10,000 a year, well, we need to relook at allocating it so we don't give out 50 every year if we're only getting 10 to make this sustainable for as many events and for as many years as we can to help offset that.
Get another hotel?
Yeah. All right. And then your final 2 pages are going to be what you submit within 90 days of your event's closure or ending. So this is your final report. This is where you get to take, hopefully reference your original budget, make sure that aligns with your projected budget totals, and then put in your actuals for what it was at the end of the event, once you've been able to go over everything. You have 90 days to do so, so don't feel like it has to be in that next week. We want it to be accurate and complete. One part of this is you cannot provide too much information in your application. Saying that you're going to use NA throughout the thing, like, nope, not applicable, not applicable. It makes it really hard to really assess what the need is if you're just saying, marketing, I need $10,000 and everything else is NA. Because it doesn't seem like that's going to be an event worth pulling anything in. So,
On this form, therefore.
yes. And so
Not
these,
much space.
so these forms are set up online for digital, digital placement and download. So you can add to it. If you need to add a secondary form, that's totally fine as well. We just need to make sure it's all submitted together to have a final report and can be adjusted. And these packets are posted the time of the allocation window. So people know they don't get to necessarily have it way ahead of time, but we will not accept outside of the application window. If there's a second application window opened, it'll be announced, and then that process and the dates and everything will be updated from there to reflect that. So now we're going to enter into the selection process. So once the application window does close, Lodging Tax Advisory Committee will review the applications, and it'll be considered to the extent of which the proposal will recommend activities for tourists or increased tourism, determine whether the applicant submitted a complete application in a timely manner, determine whether the proposed expenditures is a permitted use of lodging tax funds, which would be tourism marketing, the marketing operations of a special event, everything kind of we've gone over before. Does it qualify to be utilized in that way? Again, NA in every box is going to get sent back to you. But once the application window closes, the resubmittals also would close. And so that is just something to be very aware of, is that if you can submit it earlier and then have it sent back to you asking for more information, but we cannot we cannot accept applications outside of the window closure to maintain a fair, just application process. So feel free to submit it and say, let me know if I'm missing anything, ask questions. I can be a resource for this, for anybody out there that wants to know about it. They can reach out to me as they're filling out the application and ask me questions. Anybody in the audience here, you guys can do that same thing. We want to make sure people understand the process. So as well as that, we determine on whether the proposed expenditures has the potential to increase overnight stays. If you're having a 2-hour bubble day like we're having tomorrow here in the city of Mountlake Terrace, that's not necessarily going to qualify because not really going to pull in something like that. It's going to have a lot of buzz, but it's not going to pull in overnight stays. So it would not qualify in that realm. And then to determine whether the applicant applied for Snohomish County lodging tax or other county funds or other grants to help support their shortfall. So we don't want events to apply and say, yep, we're going to lose $30,000 this year after this event. So that tells us that they won't have the funds to necessarily move forward to the next year. So we want to make sure people find ways to fulfill their event needs as well. So a complete budget form is extremely important. You cannot provide too much information, so please fill out as much as you can and make sure you look into other funding sources. Yes, you'll go in first and then I'll get to you, Brent. No, go ahead.
Sure. When you're talking about determining whether the applicant yada indoor grant funding, will the content expert, you or whoever else is available to people who are calling in, will you do anything to help guide them towards other possible financing sources that you may be aware of, or is that something that they're gonna have to dig on their own, even though they're trying to do something here in the city?
So the question was, will myself or anybody that with knowledge of lodging tax be able to help guide applicants in the process? And the answer is yes. If anybody decides to reach out to me via email, phone call, if you reach out to somebody here at City Hall, they will probably forward you to me as the LTAC liaison. And I will do my best to help direct you to other aspects or organizations who may be able to support different events have different organizations who may want to also support and sign on as a sponsor, they have other grants as well. And so we want to make sure that we can support people as much as possible. Ebron?
Yeah, can you please, just, part that you addressed with the overnight stays,
They were what? Sorry.
like overnight stays,
Yeah, so we really wanted to have an impact on overnight stays or potentially drawing people in for overnight stays. It's not saying you have to hit a threshold of overnight stays to be able to apply. But overnight stays is what we get the money from for this fund. And so we want to encourage people to stay, because if people stay at short-term rentals, hotels, anything like that, we get that, some of that money back in the tax that we collect. And so we want to encourage events that can do that, because that way it just tells us that we're still gaining more revenue on the back end of it too. So this fund is sustained by people staying in overnight stays.
but how do you determine, if the event will draw overnight stays? Do you make those judgments by the time of the event, like how long the event is in terms of how many days, or like how do you determine that, and how if somebody's if you are putting together an event and then you want this part to be basically, you want this to be a part, how do you, like, what do you do? What are some of the key things that you'd like to see in their event that would convince you that this is something that would attract overnight stays?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we kind of gauge and assess overnight stays, and if an event can increase that, and then how do we direct people, and what do we want to see from the event to encourage that? Currently with Studio 6, we ask that they receive a letter of support from Studio 6, and whether they set up, discount codes for people to sign up for an event or through that, they can also share with us if they've seen an increase or during that time period as well. The requirement for LTAC is to have 2 representatives from businesses who collect lodging tax. And so on the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee has 2 representatives from Studio 6 on it. And they have currently been supporting us and telling us, we do see a high intake for what previously was Tour de Terrace. And so that's why they're like, yeah, it always brings in people to stay. We see we're full every time there. And I think really what it comes down to now is, like, we're looking down the road, is going to be, does your event have a reason for people to stay? Is it going as an evening event where people just say, oh, it's going to make more sense? Is it attracting people from a larger region of the area that may not come to Mountlake Terrace, but you're pulling in because of a large sporting event? Is it going to be a multi-city tournament that people are going to come in and need to stay here and need a place to, put their head down afterwards because they're going to play another game tomorrow? Are they going to be performing multiple days in a row? Is it a band that coming in? And so it's really trying to find those aspects that would encourage people to stay. But again, it's not a threshold of it needs to hit a certain number. It's just show us that there is a reason that people may be staying. It could be the staff of the event are coming from out of town and need a place to stay because they don't live here, but they're staying up till 11, maybe back on site by 4. Or maybe, your bands are coming in, they need a place to stay because they're not traveling in a tour bus or anything like that. So does that answer your question? Okay. Thank you. And then over to the allocation process. So once the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, or LTAC, will select the organizations and the amount that they've requested, they take the recommendations to council, and then council then can approve or request more information from Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. Council cannot request any expenditures outside of what outside of what LTAC has previously requested without LTAC reconvening and addressing those. After they have been approved by council, city liaison will then create agreements and contracts for each event based on the fund allocation they were granted. And funds will be paid after completion of the event with submitted receipts or invoices for qualified uses. And so that is also kind of going over that in your application, you will state how much money you are requesting. That is not a guarantee to the funds that you are going to get. You can request 50,000, but you might only get 20. You can request 10 and might only get 5, based on the applications we have and how many we are trying to get through, how many of them show they have a need for funding, how many of them have searched for funding elsewhere? And we want to make sure we can kind of balance that. Not saying that you've gotten funding from Snohomish, so now we don't want to give you funding because you already got some. You've checked another box, so it's how to balance that as well. So our timeline for Mountlake Terrace is our open application window usually starts in early September, closes about mid-October. Then we take mid-October to November to do LTAC review. So LTAC will meet 1 to 2 times based on how many questions and concerns, or if there are any extra information that needs to be requested from the applicant that LTAC is trying to understand better. Any questions that are sent back to the applicant at that point does not count as a invalid submittal or application. It's just at requesting clarity if somebody on Lodging Tax Advisory Committee does not understand or they want more clarity for what that event or section is. LTAC will then make its recommendations to council at least 40 days after application is closed. And then once council approves the request from LTAC, then we would enter into contracts based on when that meeting is. And so we try to get LTAC on the calendar as soon as we know that we have our agreed upon recommendations. And then it goes to council. And then from council, once it's approved, then we can enter those, which is why there's no date stated, because it could vary based on when council meetings are and when LTAC has been able to meet. And we'll enter into agreements for the events depending on the start date of event. If your event starts January 1st, then we need to really get on that. If it's a little later, we can work on, what are the needs? How are we trying to move forward with this? So any dates that are not specific, it is because this is a very free flowing aspect of application. And sometimes we have to push it back because meetings can't happen, or, the date's doesn't line up, or we cannot have a quorum for our committee. We need to make sure everything aligns for us to do this in an appropriate way. And then we're going to open it for any discussions, questions, comments for the holistic aspect. And then I'm going to kind of pass it over if either you two have anything that you guys want to add to it or anything like that. Yes. The question is there a minimum or maximum that any one event can get? There is not. So the allocation amount that is budgeted is the max amount that the city is allocating for that session. And so if you have 10 people that apply for it and they all ask for the same max amount, that's not everybody's going to get it, but there's no minimum. If you just need $200, $300, you can ask for that too. If you just think you're trying to do something smaller start, or if you need 20, 30,000, you can ask for that too. That's going to come down to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee to really make those judgments on where they see the need based on what the application shows and where the other funds are and really what their assessment is.
This question I have has to do with the application process and with the funding for the LTAC period. If an organization is want to have something here in Mountlake Terrace, and they're going to be bringing people in that absolutely need hotel space, lodging space, maybe multiple lodging spaces, but Motel 6 is gone. But so those people would necessarily, if the event happens in Shoreline, Linwood, whatever, do the cities coordinate, and will they coordinate, in terms of tax sharing? Because we're providing an event that's bringing revenue to their city.
So the question is, if we no longer have a hotel, if we would potentially enter tax sharing with another city who does have that. And that is a question that is outside of my purview, and I would defer to one of you two.
Sure. So that would not happen because whatever hotel is in a city, then the state collects that tax. It doesn't come directly to us, and then it comes from the state. So it's just depending on what jurisdiction that hotel is in. It's the same idea. If you think about a store and they're collecting sales tax, that sales tax stays in that jurisdiction and it does not go to another city.
So when this organization applies to LTAC, the county, and they're applying for this funding for it to happen in Mountlake Terrace, the county can't or doesn't or won't, you know, I think you know where I'm going, right?
So the county is if you're operating within Snohomish County.
Right.
So if you being in Mountlake Terrace still qualify you because you do it, but if they're staying in Linwood per se, it's still, the revenue still coming in through the county. And so that one has a little more leeway to it. Because it's a countywide allocation outside of a city municipality.
Is there any guidance or limitation on how the grant funds will be applied? You list marketing and promotion or other categorization, but since it's reimbursement after the fact, it could be just applied to the general fund.
So the question of how can the funds be utilized that are not specifically, so there is a list of aspects that it goes to, but it also states event operations. So it can be used for security for an event. It can be used to offset that cost. It can be used for the marketing aspect itself. It could be used for the banners. It could be used for a lot of different aspects going to that. One thing it cannot be used for is purchase of alcohol. And so things like that, there are some legalities that it cannot be used for. We will actually give everybody the website to kind of reference later that has a lot of that good information on there. But it would have to come from submitting, this is my invoice that I got from our security agency and this is what we paid, show that we paid it. Send that over. Okay, we can make that check and go from there. Yeah, really, I'm sorry.
Apologies if you've already stated this. Where do the funds for the LTAC grant?
The funds for LTAC grant come from the lodging institutions within each city's limits. So that's hotel, motel, or short-term, long-term stays.
So that it's not federally.
No. All right. Yes,
So the short-term stays, so like VRBO and then kind of.
yes.
So any of
VRBO,
those
Airbnb, things like that.
Short-term rental.
Mhm. Yes.
So we've run out of questions. I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. This council, we fought very hard to pick this process up. I have no real indication that folks are going to show up, because we have historically been able to find some really amazing experiences here. So it's exciting to see the new potential experiences that are in this room right now, or that you've shared this information with. So thank you all very much.
There's a website, you might want to write this down. It's MRSC, Municipal Research Service Center. And that, if you just search lodging tax, you'll see articles in there and it'll give you more information for what lodging tax is, what you can use it for. So it's a really good resource.
No, got it.
It's just MRSC. If you
I think it's .org.
Is it?
Yeah,
.org.
.org. Yeah.
MRC.org. Even if you just type MRC lodging tax, it'll
yeah,
come up.
It'll come up.
Do organizations need to be nonprofit or have nonprofit status?
No.
Does it need to be an LLC? Can it be a sole proprietor? Does it need to have any tax? Like number?
I think we need W-9 one way or another, right? You need to be able to have a W-9.
W-9, yeah, definitely for us to be able to pay you. It can be a for-profit
Okay,
as long as you just bring in tourism.
all right. So it doesn't need to be an organization registered with the state. It could be a private individual if you were promoting an event or something.
Yes. Theoretically, yeah.
Yeah. As long as you're trying to increase things happening in Mountlake Terrace.
One of the things I would say is just, this is one of the funding avenues you have for an event, right? So if you want to put an event on though, that's on city property or city right away, you have to get a special event permit. which is a whole nother process. So you want to start early. There's a couple different thresholds on how big it is, whether it's a 30 or 60-day application window. So you have to apply. And if it's on private property, it's even a different thing, right? If you own the property, that's much different even. But so there's also the other thing, if it is on city property, there could be an agreement to be able to use that city property of some sort between the city and that organization. So you're going to want to explore all those things and make sure that you talk that out with the city if that's the case, so we can get you on the right track and start it early. So
Would you kind of advise getting the permit for the event prior to making the application for the grant? Doesn't
no,
matter.
I think this process might lend to whether you can even do the event, right? The
Right.
funding aspect of it might be a part of that. I mean, this is happening the fall
Yeah.
prior to a lot of the next summer's events. Not every event's in the summer, I understand, but a lot of them are. So, I mean, it just depends on your timing for the event, right? If your event's gonna happen in January, then you may want to start everything else before you get to the lodging tax.
Maybe good to get preliminary approval of the permit.
It's always, yeah, you can always discuss your idea with us. We kind of help you out, send you in the right direction. If there's additional partners, we may even know other people that have talked to us that want to partner and do something like that and can put you together.
Given the window where it is, September, middle of October, and then 45 days out there to make that decision, how far in advance can one apply for these funds? Because say if someone's looking to do something in September, like next week or something of next year, then they probably should have already applied for this LTAX, right?
So if you're looking, any event in 2026, the calendar year would be applied in this coming cycle. And so our Arts of the Terrace applied last year for their event here in September, the Arts of the Terrace show. And so that does lead to a lot of people, that's where kind of a lot of the challenges have been, is somebody wants to do an event, they don't realize, oh, I had to apply a year ago if they're trying to have a later event. And that's why some cities and municipalities do it multiple times. We're just a really small city and there's a lot of work that goes into this. And so we do ours at the end. So we know going into the year, it's very bookended, January 1st to December 31st. And then always open to having people have that conversation of, what do I need to do? Kind of let them go through this packet, walk through the questions of where they may want to have it and things like that, so they can be ready for next year. All right.
Yeah.
No,
And I just wanted to say one last thing, if we're just done asking questions, that thank you, Councilmember Woodard, for mentioning that, kind of the motivation for doing this. I know we talked about purpose in the beginning of the slide, but really the history of this funding, there really has only been a couple of applicants really for years. And there's kind of been one that rotated out and a new one rotated in. But I don't think there's been a lot of, publicizing of what we're trying to do and trying to get events rolling here and give some of this funding out. And we were starting to build up quite ending fund balance here. So that was kind of the impetus too, to try to get out, tell people what we're doing and try to encourage people to apply for the funding. And the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee has really been a proponent of trying to get new people to apply for it and trying to get other people involved. And so council set some goals that really were trying to get people to activate the community and let's get people out there. And part of it was they hired, Andrew's position for him to get out there and start events. And so I'm hoping that is kind of going to get us started and other people to feel excited about doing the same thing. And I feel like with this many people here, that looks pretty good. So that's exciting. Right. Right. So if you do have other questions, feel free to ask us, send us emails or call us.
and we have our lodging tax site on the events page. So my information's on there at cityofmlt.com. There's a green bar towards the bottom that says city events. Click on there, go to lodging tax. You can just reach out to me directly. If you have any questions or something that didn't answer, it pops up later.
So who is the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee? You keep talking about them. Who's the one
So-
making that decision?
Lodging Tax Advisory Committee is made up of one council member liaison, two representatives from the hotel or motel that we collect revenue from, and two members from an organization that would be qualified to apply for lodging tax. And so that can shift. It could be anybody who's applicable, so there could be any nonprofit organization that wants to potentially do events. They don't have to be applying for lodging tax. They don't have to be doing something that would be able to host an event, but it's eligible to do so. And so that way it's kind of balanced, so like a 5-person committee for Mountlake Terrace. And then you have a staff liaison who's kind of there as just the guiding factor of, ask the questions, here's my information, not a voting member, but just kind of someone with information if they have questions of how to understand what is being shared with them, or how to know, did this application really come in at this proper date, or did they answer more questions that we don't know? And so that's what my role is as far as that goes.
So what's gonna happen when we lose our one hotel as far as the committee goes?
So then in order to form and allocate funds, the committee would then have to have 2 members of somebody with short-term stays. And so that's somebody who has a short-term rental within Mountlake Terrace
Like
and being able, Airbnb, VRBO, to be able to maintain that allocation committee status. And so that would be us having to reach out and find 2 members that would be willing to partake on that committee as representatives of people who would be able to collect that tax.
The council does appoint those committee members too, so that goes through the city council.
But no other,
Vote on it, but that being said, why we lose our hotel? That same space is gonna become workforce house, which if you don't know the housing price right now, you should have applied.
Yeah.
Right, you know, it's gonna be renovation, so it's amazing to happen. Now, that said, the city is actively seeking more folks to bring their business here, hotels and other resources, so hopefully this would be a temporary issue. But if it isn't, that was happening, I mean, continue to offer, and it helps that we have a little bit of bank and now. So we're not contributing in the moment, still have some room to bring in the resources.
thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here, and let me know if you guys have any questions. We're